Hi everyone, this is Arvind from MindMajix, and today I welcome you all to this amazing session on SAP Security Interview questions. So in this particular video, we will be covering roughly around 60 questions. And once you go through these questions, I can assure you that you will successfully clear your SAP Security Interview. So without any further delay, let's get started with our first question. So the first question over here is distinguish between the functions of USOBXC and USOBTC. So guys, in this particular question, we have divided the answer into two columns. The first one is for USOBXC and the second column is for USOBTC. So if you talk about USOBXC, so this gives you the personal information about which the particular authorization checks the need execution inside the transaction and which authorization check doesn't need to be. And if you talk about USOBTC, so this table gives information regarding the proposal data of the authorization, and it includes the data related to an authorization which is useful for the transactions. The next point over here is in case of USOBXC, this table also looks at the checks which are present in the profile generator. And in case of USOBTC, it looks at the default set of values that need to be present in the profile generator. So these were some of the critical differences between USOBXC and USOBTC. The next question is, what is SAP security? The main role of SAP security is to provide the right access for the users with the business according to their responsibility and the authority that they hold. And here the permission is supposed to be given as per their roles in any of the organizations or departments. So this was a quick definition of SAP security. The next question is, what does one mean by roles as far as SAP security is concerned? So roles are nothing but the transaction codes. These are generally found in the groups. So these codes are given to take out a specific business assignment. All of these codes or T codes or roles require some specific privileges to implement any function as far as SAP security is concerned. And these special privileges are known as authorization. The next question is, elaborate on how all users can be locked at the same time at SAP Security. It is possible to lock every user at the same time at SAP Security. For this, one has to implement a transaction code EWZ5 for doing this particular task. The next question is, explain the necessary steps that need to be taken prior to assigning a task for users even when the approval is given from the authorities or the authorized controllers. There are certain steps that need to be taken prior to handing over or giving SAP or to any of the users. So these steps are necessary even when it has the approval of someone in the position of authority. So these prerequisites include, the first is to enable the log of the audit. So this can be done using a transaction code SM19. And the second step is to retrieve the log of the audit. So this can be done by using a transaction code SM20. The next question is, elaborate on the meaning of authorization object class and the meaning of authorization object. It is very essential to understand the meaning of authorization object and that of authorization object class. The authorization object is nothing but group of the fields of authorization which looks after the function of a specific activity. On the other hand, authorization is related to a specific action only, whereas the field of the authorization looks after the security admin. The next question is, how can one delete numerous roles from the production systems, development, and the QA? So there are a few steps that make it possible to delete numerous roles from the above mentioned systems like the production system, development, and the QA. So if you talk about this step, the first step over here is one needs to put the roles that are supposed to be deleted in the transport. Next, delete the mentioned roles from there, and then one has to send the transport across the production and QA. So in this way, one can delete numerous roles from production, development, and QA. The next question is, explain the steps that need to be taken before one has to execute the run system trace. So there are a few things that need to be done before one wants to execute the run system trace. So if one is going to trace the CPIC or the user ID, then prior to executing the run system trace, one has to make sure that the said ID is given to someone that is either SAP new or SAP all. The next question is, what is the highest amount of profiles and the highest amount of objects in the roles? So 312 is the highest amount of profile that a role can have, and a role can have 170 highest amount of object. The next question is, mention the transactional code for separating the execution from the transaction and locking any transaction. The transaction code which is used to lock the transaction from the execution is SM01. The next question is, what are the differences between a single role and a derived role? The main difference is that of dealing with the transaction codes. When one deals with a single role, then the transaction codes can be added or deleted easily. But if one is dealing with a derived role, then a person is not able to add or delete any transaction code. So this is the most important difference that one needs to know about a single role and a derived role. The next question is, within SAP Security, what is SOD? So guys, SOD stands for segregation of duties, and SOD is implemented in SAP to detect and prevent fraud during business transactions. The next question is, if one has to go through the summary of the profile and authorization object, then what transaction code needs to be used? So in case if a person has to go through the summary for profile and authorization object, then there are two different transaction codes that are to be used. So for the summary of any authorization, object 1 has to use the transaction code of SU03. And if one needs the summary of profile details, then one has to use the transaction code of SU02. The next question is a very important question. What is user buffer? So whenever a user logs into the SAP R3 system, a user buffer is built where it has all the authorizations associated with the user. So basically, each user will have their user buffer. So just to give you an example, if there is a user called Krishna and he tries to log in to the system, then the buffer would have authorization information under user underscore Krishna underscore role. On the other hand, the user would fail to log on to the system under a few scenarios. For example, for the user, authorization information doesn't exist in the user buffer. And if the user buffer has many entries and is flooded with authorization information, in this case, the number of entries can be restricted or limited by using a profile parameter called authorization number in user buffer. The next question is, what parameter is used in the user buffer for controlling the excess of entries? The user buffer looks at the entries and it has to control the entries because they shouldn't exceed a particular limit. The parameter which is used for this is authorization number in user buffer. The next question is, what is the number of transaction codes that can be given to a particular role? A role can have a transaction code of as many as 14,000. The next question is, in order to stock the illegal passwords, what table is usually used? In order to stock or accumulate the illegal password, a table called USR40 is usually used. This particular table stores various patterns and arrangements of words that cannot be implemented while making any password. The next question is, what is known by PFCG time dependency? The PFCG time dependency is nothing but a report which is normally used for comparison of the user master. The PFCG time dependency also makes sure to wipe away any profiles from the main record which seem to have expired and are of no use. There is also a transaction code that can be employed in order to execute this particular action. The transaction code which is used to do this is PFUD. The next question is, what is the role of users compared in SAP Security? The role of user comparison in the SAP Security is that it helps in the comparison of master records of the user. The next question is a very important question. What are the different types of tabs that are present in the PFCG? There are a lot of important and essential tabs that are present in the PFCG. So the first one over here is the description tab. So this tab is essential for describing any changes which are made, such as the details which are related to any role. Mentioning if there are any additions or removal of any transactional codes, also mentioning if there are any changes in the authorization object, and much more. The next tab is the menu tab. So it is essential to design the user menu, such as addition of any transactional codes. The third one is the authorization tabs. So this tab is used for the maintenance of authorization profile and authorization data. And last but not the least is the user tab. So this tab is used for any adjustment in the main user record for assigning the users to any role. The next question is, what is the T code that is used to delete all of the old security audit logs? SM18 T code is the transaction code that is used to delete all the old security audit logs. The next question is, which program or report one must use to regenerate the profile of SAP? So if one has to regenerate the profile of SAP, then one has to use the report or program called, as you can see on the screen, AGR regenerate SAP all. The next question is, if one wants the display of the text of the transaction code, then which of the table will be used? So if a person wants to display all of the text of the transaction code, then the TSTCT table will be used. The next question is, if a user buffer needs to be displayed, then what transactional code will be used? So if a user buffer needs to be displayed, then the transactional code that will be used is SU56. The next question is, which table of the SAP can be used for determining single roles that are given for certain role? So if one has to know the single role, the table which is used is AGR AGRS. The next question is, if one has to see the number of filters in the SM19, which is the security audit log, then which parameter is used? So guys, the parameter which is used for deciding on the number of filters is, as you can see on the screen, RSAU/number of filters. The next question is, explain the derived role. The derived role is an already present role. This role receives functions and menu structure which is present in the role referenced. This function of inheriting by the roles is only possible when no type of transactional code is assigned prior. The roles assigned at the highest level will pass on the authorization as a default to derived roles, and this can be changed later on. Certain roles are not to be passed to the derived roles, and they need to be created newly, and this includes the organizational definitions as well as assignments of the user. Derived roles are well designed and they have a fixed functionality, which means it has the same menu and transaction. But the characteristics are different as far as the level of organization is concerned. The next question is, explain the working of a composite role. So composite role is like a big container that can collect numerous varied roles. So these types of roles do not have any data about authorization. In case of any changes in the authorization, since composite roles represent it, the data needs to be maintained regarding every role of every composite role. The creation of the composite roles is only useful when some of the employees in the organization require the authorization from various roles. So in that case, the composite role can be set and the user can be assigned to that particular group. So this is time saving rather than separately assigning every user to each different role. When a user is assigned to one composite role, then during comparison, they are spontaneously assigned to other elementary roles. The next question is, which transactional codes are most commonly used in SAP Security? The transactional codes which are most commonly used in SAP Security are SU53 for authorization of analysis, ST01 for trace, SUIM for the reports, SU01D for the display user, SU10 for bulk changes, PFCG to maintain roles, and SU01 for creation or changing the user. The next question is, what are role templates? The role templates are nothing but the activity clusters which are predetermined. These clusters or groups consist of reports, web addresses, and transactions. The next question is, explain the process of creating a user group in SAP system. So guys, there are a few steps that are involved in creating a user group in SAP system. First, use the T code SUGR, and execute it. After this, provide a name for the user group in the text box. Then what you have to do is you have to click on create button, and in the key in the description, you have to click on the save button. So this completes the user group created in the SAP system. The next question is, how do you check the transport requests created by other user? So by using the SE10T code, we can find the transport requests which are created by other users. The next question is, how do you find user-defined security parameters for system default values? So by using the T code RSP FPAR, we can find the user-defined and system default security parameters. The next question is, what is the process to assign a logical system to a client? The logical system can be assigned to a client by using a specific T code, that is SCC4. So this needs to be done with utmost care because it might alter the other configurations like CUA if in case it has been pre-configured. The next question is, why do we use the T code SU25? So if you want to copy data from US BOT, US box to tables, USO BTC and USO BXC, then we can use the T code SU25. The next question is, why do we use the ST01T code? ST01T code is used to trace the user authorizations. The next question is, what are the derived roles in SAP? So derived roles are defined by other existing roles called as the master roles. Derived roles inherit the features from a master role like functions, menu structure, transactions, reports, web links, and so on. The next question is, why do we use the T code SU56? The T code SU56 is used to display the current user buffer, which authorization is assigned in the user master record. The next question is, how do you lock multiple users at a time in SAP? So we can lock multiple users using the SU01T code. For this, go to SU01T code and enter the user names to be locked. The next question is, which T code do you use to create authorizations group? So we can create authorization groups in SAP using SE54T code. The next question is, what is the maximum number of roles that can be assigned to a user? So in SAP, the maximum number of roles that can be assigned is 312. The next question is, what are the different layers of security in SAP? So SAP supports multiple layers of security such as authentication, authorization, integrity, privacy, and obligation. The next question is, how can you get the user list in SAP? So we can get the user list in SAP by using the SM04 or AL08 transaction code. The next question is, how do you check background jobs? So using the SM37 transaction code, we can have a look at the background jobs that are currently running. The next question is, which transaction code is used to manage lag entries? So the transaction code SM12 is used to manage the log entries. The next question is, what is the difference between a role and a profile? So guys, there is no much difference between a role and a profile because they go hand in hand. So role is nothing but a combination of authorizations and combinations. So this information is stored in the form of profiles. At any given point in time, it can be more than one profile associated with a role. And by creating a role, a profile is automatically generated. The next question is, what do you mean by profile versions? So if any parameter is modified within a profile, it automatically creates an updated version of the same profile. The process is repeated whenever there is modification within a profile. All of these profiles are saved into the database with a naming convention. The stored files of the same profile are considered as profile versions. The next question is, what is the main difference between a single role and a composite role? So a role is nothing but a container that has or collects the information related to the transaction and generates the necessary profile. On the other hand, a composite role is also a container that has the information about different roles. The next question is, list out some of the SAP security T codes. So guys, as you can see on the screen, these are some of the most frequently used SAP security T codes. As you can see here, the first code is PFGC, and this code is used for maintaining the roles. Next, you have SU10, which is used for handling the users, and SU01 is used for creating the user or changing the user. After this, you have ST01, which is used for tracing the system. And then you also have SU53, which is used for analyzing and authorization. The next question is, explain how a password rule can be enforced. So this process is basically very straightforward. If password rules need to be enforced, then the user has a profile parameter for the same. So if this parameter is used, then password rules will be applied automatically. The next question is how to check the table logs and what are the T codes to be used for the same. To check whether the table logs are available, firstly, one has to check whether the logging function is activable or not for a particular table. So this can be done by using the T code SE13. If the table is enabled for logging, then the table logs can be seen using the T code SCU3. The next question is, mention the highest permitted number of profiles in a role and the highest permitted number of objects in a role. So guys, the highest permitted number of profiles in a role is 312 and the highest permitted number of objects in a role is 150. The next question is, do you know the transaction code or T code to log the transaction execution? So the transaction code that is used for logging the transaction execution is SM01. The next question is, how many transaction codes can be assigned to a particular role? So we can assign at least 14,000 transactions to a particular role. The next question is, what is the process to check the transport checks created by another user? After providing the username information, we will have the ability to check the transport requests that were created by other sets of users. The next question is, what is the use of SU25T code? So the main use of SU25T code is the data is copied from one set of tables to another set of tables. The data that is copied from USOBT and USOBX to USOBTC and USOBXC. The next question is, what is the use of authorization object STABULIN? Generally, the authorization object is to provide access to all of the tables on the row level. The next question is, what is a T code in SAP? So a T code is nothing but a transaction code, and this is used for running the program in SAP application. The next question is, what are the user types for background jobs? So user types for background jobs are, first one is the system user, and then you have the second type, which is the communication user. The next question is, what is the transaction code that is used to troubleshoot the problem for a background user? So the transaction code or T code that is used to troubleshoot the problem for a background user is ST01. The next question is, what are the different types of users within the SAP system? So guys, as you can see on the screen, these are the types of users which are available in the SAP system. The first one is dialog user. Then you have the service user. Next one is the system user. The fourth one is the communication user. And last but not the least, you have the reference user. So guys, with this, we have come to the end of this session on SAP security interview questions. I hope you guys have enjoyed this session. If at all you have any queries or doubts related to this session, then you can write them in the comment section. And my team is here to help you resolve all your doubts and queries. So guys, I wish you all the very best for your upcoming interview. And thank you so much for being with us.